What's the biggest mistake you see startups making? Is it a lack of financing, or is there something, because you get to see a lot of things where you're just like, I could have told you not to do that, that, and that. Is there some commonality you see?
It's a very hard question to answer because it's so different. I think right now we're seeing a trend towards people setting up companies for the hell of it, and that's very sad and slightly scary, right? It's gotten so easy to set up a company that people are doing that because they feel like they need to, they feel like they can, and a lot of people who are first-time entrepreneurs would probably benefit from staying with the awesome companies they've been in before, like a Spotify or a Rovio, right? It's nice to see young people gaining more experience in those positions and not leave so early, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's great that people are excited about entrepreneurship. So it's hard for me to kind of answer that question. The biggest mistake is if you're not passionate about something, right? If you're not really interested in building a large business, there's a question of why you're founding a company, right? And that, I see that quite a bit, and it's very difficult. I mean, you can't tell an entrepreneur, man, you shouldn't be doing this at all, right? Like, I don't think you're ready yet, right? Or I think this is I do sometimes tell people it's a terrible idea, but telling them, at this point in their career, they've already made that decision, they've taken the plunge. So all you can do right now is try to, help them see that it goes relatively well. The other biggest issue, I think, is that people are doing things because they think theoretically it needs to be done, or they're building a product that they think should exist, rather than making sure that they're building something that people want. And I think everywhere in venture, that's the biggest problem. And it's compounded by the fact that if it makes sense to venture, right, they'll raise a lot of money and then they'll try to push that product into the market, and that's even worse, right? Because now they're not only are they trying to sell something that people don't want, but they're spending a lot of money trying to sell something that people don't want. And yeah, I think those are some of the biggest issues. The limiting factor in Europe continues to be we don't have enough quality management. So I sometimes wish we had a bit fewer companies and a bit more focus on kind of making those companies succeed.
Is like the tech startup the new rock star? Is that why a lot of people want to be the startup guy?
A little bit.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of it's the nerdy chic kind of thing.
You must see this all the time. No comment?
Couldn't possibly comment.
Okay.
But let's be honest. I mean, it is. You can track over the past 5 to 10 years the way that it has moved from a subculture into popular culture in a very big way. And I think, I think I've probably said this on the show before, but when you start making films like The Social Network about, that's a cinema, that's, millions of kids and young people going to see these films, and it's like all I have to do is get a marker and write on a piece of glass, and then I'm going to be famous and screw my mates over.
And rich,
right? Like those sort of moments, I think, and also, the way that I think we talk about quite a lot, but the way that technology has become seamless rather than like a thing that only the geeky did. I mean, we have these phones in our pockets, we have apps, and like the media covers as mainstream.
It's absolutely ubiquitous.
Technology. Exactly, sure. And that's where you start to shift. And so people are like, oh, okay, so they see this thing and they say, okay, well, you look at obviously the US is where a lot of this popular cultural kind of influence around startups comes from: television culture, TV culture, film culture. And a lot of people are young, and it focuses on the most successful, and a lot of those are very young. And so then you have this generation of people thinking that this is a get-rich-quick game.
Yeah.
And that it's a game to be played. And the question, it's interesting, your point, I had a friend who works at the BBC, and she lived in New York for a while, and she was kind of looking at this from like I'm struggling to find working class entrepreneurs, because a lot of the people that come and pitch me stuff are like trust fund kids or middle class kids who, they can afford to take a few years out and do this lifestyle thing because it's cool, rather than they desperately need to make this work or they are going to lose it all. And and I think there's, to Max's point, there's kind of arguments for both, in that you need that optimism to get started somewhere. Everyone's got to start somewhere, and nobody's going to know what they're doing in the beginning. But there's also this kind of like, are you doing it because you love it, or are you doing it because it's cool and you saw a film and
no, I can see it.
I mean, the one thing I would wish on this industry was better media. I think I mean, everyone's going to hate me for this, but I'm not going to name publications, but everyone knows what the big blogs are in media. The quality of news reporting in tech is terrible, right? Because they make it seem like a get-rich-quick scheme, because they make it seem like startup lottery, because they don't properly report on what the drivers of a business are, because it's just not really the journalist's fault, right? It's just that a lot of these publications are run and employ people that don't have the commercial experience, right? And so you get relatively superficial reporting that that just makes people have the wrong idea of what it is to run a company, or how, you know, how things like enterprise sales work, or how telesales work, or, you know, how online marketing actually works. And I think that's a pity, right? I think you know, when Milo launched the kernel, actually, I was very excited about when he said, you know, I'm going to do deeper tech reporting, because I want someone to dig into the bowels of a business and tell me what makes it work, right? What are the key performance indicators that drive decision making, right? What matters about a subscription, you know, model startup? And there are a lot of things that, you know, that are, you know, that you cannot learn online, which is insane, because, I mean, you know, shouldn't this be the biggest repository of, you know, of knowledge that we have in the world? The best place to actually get knowledge about startups is probably Quora, right? Because actually people who know what they're talking about are answering questions with some level of substance, right? And there is no depth in tech reporting, and that's really too bad.
So do you think then, on that European scale, to follow up on that point, that that the kernel's doing that now? Do you think that's where it's happening, or do you think that it's not happening anywhere? Do you think it's kind of changing? It's interesting that you mark out the kernel, because of course it's a very unique and controversial. We've spoken about potentially having Milo come in at some point to talk about it, because it is an interesting concept. And divisive, but whether or not I think
Milo's taken it in a different direction, which I cannot fault him for, right? Because, I mean, first of all, he's a friend, so I think you know, he's not had the easiest time, and he's kind of come back, and that's great. I think when he said he wanted more depth and kind of longer pieces and so on, he has taken people that actually have something to say, and he's created controversy, and that's attracted traffic, and he needs traffic to sell ads, and, you know, that's a media startup, right? That's great. What I was looking for is slightly different, but I also think that had he done that, his business probably wouldn't be successful, right? So I can't really fault him for that. But if you run a media startup, you know, the most successful one is the Huffington Post, right? And that's definitely not kind of deep reporting, right? No.
Jesus, I love Ariana, but the front page of the Huffington Post, it'll make you want to hang yourself.
Well, I thought, you know, the other one is the Daily Mail, so you're stuck between a real rock and a hard place on that one. But the Daily Mail obviously being the most profitable for that exact reason, about links and traffic.
Do you see that? Is that, like, if you fly to Silicon Valley and hang out in Mountain View and all that stuff, is that something that you notice right away, that people seem to be pushing in an extra gear or driving a little harder?
There is a bit more driving a little bit harder. I do think that there are countervailing benefits here, but I would love to see some of the work ethic just click up a notch here. But that's one reason that people with our accents tend to do well over here.
No, I'm really glad you